Good morning. Our God, only you, only you, only you, our God, only you, only you. Good morning, only you, our God, only you. Only you, only you are God. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I am trying out some new stands this morning, so hopefully everything works well. Good morning, Lady Keisha. Thank you for joining us on our YouTube live stream, and whoever else that is up there. Good morning to the We Dare Squad. Good morning, Lady Barbara. Good morning, Pastor Ben. Good morning, Lady Ravonda. Good morning, Lady Evelyn. All right. Had to go with some new stands. I want to thank the We Dare Squad for your sponsorship. Helps us to do things like that. All right. So, as you all know, if you did not see my notice online, my notice was that our broadcast is going to go 90 minutes today and tomorrow because of how much things I have to cover. And so I want to make sure that I finish this up this week because I do want to get back to my regular broadcast on next week. So today, I told you that we'd be discussing the notions of Christian racists. We'd be talking a little bit about a conversation that was had recently because of a minister, I think he's a pastor, also known as a prophet. Good morning, love. Who had posted his opinion about the Nike situation with Colin Kaepernick, and everybody is definitely welcome to their own opinions about that, right? We all operate under the First Amendment of the Constitution, right? We have the right to the freedom of speech, but we don't get to dictate the consequences of our freedom of speech. Let me see if I can move my light this way a little bit since YouTube already gives me great lighting. Is that better? Yeah, that's better for Periscope because Periscope looks a little on the dark side. And let's see. There we go. All right. Yeah, that's better. So, um, of course, many people, I guess, were outraged by what he said because I think he called the company and Colin Kaepernick an idiot, which is, for me personally, I don't use those kinds of words towards people. I might say an idea is stupid or idiotic, but I try not to call any person those words. I try to not resort to name calling for a reason because the world resorts to name calling. And so because he used those inflammatory words, people in the kingdom of God got very angry. Some of them called him a racist. And to be honest with you, I don't follow him at all because I know he and some others are trumpeters of Trump prophetics. And what do I mean by that? I mean that there's a series of prophecies that went out that were false prophecies, trying to spiritualize and justify Trump being in office. And I personally definitely disagree with those prophecies because they're not scriptural. Just because someone relates a number of a scriptural text to the number of the presidency does not mean that all of a sudden that's of God or that the presidency has all of a sudden been spiritualized. And the reality is, we haven't ever really done that for any other president, and especially not one who has been as grievously offensive in many different ways to many different people groups. All right. So we don't go around as prophets, we don't go around spiritualizing leaders in order to justify their coming to office or their coming to power. That's not what prophets do. However, because of those false prophecies, many Christians have bought into them, trying to relate Mr. Trump to the King Cyrus. And again, if you go back and exegete the text and you go back and study King Cyrus, you will know that he in no way aligns with King Cyrus or the spirit of King Cyrus. And we did put out something about that on our Life Nation page. If you type in King Cyrus Life Nation, it'll probably pull up the long explanation we gave as to why that was incorrect. So all that being said, I was sent his live conversation with another gentleman by the name of Corey Robinson. I believe he too is a minister. I have met Corey Robinson before and in the past, and so I will reserve my opinion about him as a person, because that's not germane to this subject. So he and Corey Robinson, who he is good friends with, they mentioned that in their broadcast. Good morning, Lady Apostle. They mentioned that in their broadcast that they were in fact friends and had known each other for years. They proceeded to have what was supposed to be a conversation addressing his posting, and it was supposed to have been about his posting of why he posted that, because people wanted answers. Obviously, from my understanding, he's very popular in prophetic charismatic circles, and he's getting ready to open a school of the prophets. And so he brought Corey Robinson on to supposedly have a conversation about Colin Kaepernick and racism in America. Well, that conversation actually went south. And I watched the conversation in replay mode, so I made several comments on the broadcast itself. But that conversation went south for a couple of reasons. Number one, people had accused Jeremiah Johnson of being a racist. But his conversation on that broadcast pretty much solidified it in people's minds that if he isn't racist, he's at least low-key bigoted, and what's the other word? And he's possibly a white nationalist. And anybody who studies the subject of race and racism, bigotry, prejudice, and white nationalism, who is not a believer, would even come to the same conclusion. All right. So many black people on this broadcast were telling him, you are not listening to us. You're not listening to the plight of Black America. You're choosing to continually believe a false narrative about why Colin Kaepernick was kneeling in the first place. Colin Kaepernick has come out several different times and told people why he's kneeling. So if at this point, if people are still choosing to take offense by saying he's kneeling because he's disrespecting the flag, or he's disrespecting the anthem, or he's disrespecting the soldiers, at this point they are choosing offense, because he did come out and clarify why he was kneeling. He is kneeling to draw attention to a subject that continues to be ignored, and that is, what kind of solutions can our country find towards police brutality and the oversaturation of killing of unarmed people of color? Now, let us be clear. Not just people of color unarmed are being killed. And I have shared on Daring Dialogues, I have shared several instances on our Facebook page of not just unarmed people of color being killed. This is a problem. All right. And we may get into some stats today about how much violence happens towards in America in general, in terms of how people deal with arresting citizens. Many times it's shoot first and ask questions later. And so these are things that they are concerned about, that he is concerned about, in terms of how do we get these numbers down? How do we address the unarmed shootings? How do we address the overuse of force in law enforcement. That is what the kneeling is about. So again, if you continue to say that the kneeling is about the anthem, the flag, patriotism, soldiers, if you continue to go that route and say that that's what it's about, you are choosing offense. That's like if I tell you, you ask me, what is my middle name? And I tell you, my middle name is Antoinette. And you say, but no, your middle name is Shantae. And I tell you several times, no, my middle name is Antoinette. But you continue to believe my middle name is Shantae, and you go off on a whole tangent. Good morning, Sir Walter. You go off on a whole tangent about my middle name being Shantae, and I keep repeatedly telling you my middle name is Antoinette. At that point, you are choosing to believe something other than what I have clearly told you and presented to you. And that is what is happening all across this country, because one or two people presented a media narrative that deflected away from what he was talking about to begin with. People ran with that media narrative, and now you have millions of people thinking that that is what he was kneeling for, when all they have to do is Google Colin Kaepernick explains what he is kneeling for, and they will hear from his own mouth what he's kneeling about. It's really that simple. All right. So I personally am not going to entertain arguments with people about a false narrative. I'm just not going to do it. And I made up my mind that I'm not going to take offense, because in order to take offense, you have to catch whatever people are throwing at you. Let that sink in. Somebody gonna get that later today. So if the offense is thrown at me, I have to catch it. I have to take it in, and I'm not going to do that. I don't care who's doing it at this point, because for Christ I live and for Christ I die. I have too much assignment ahead of me in life to allow my assignment to be barricaded because of offense. Yes, Lady Apostle, false narratives seem to be the norm today. So I'm going to start out by sharing, because what happened in that video was many people went away with the belief that Jeremiah Johnson is either a soft white supremacist, a white nationalist, or very low-key bigoted, because the interaction or the conversation turned into, well, what about black people? Matter of fact, one of the last statements he said in his broadcast was, Corey, why don't you tell black people what they should be doing? All right. And this is similar to a slave master bringing out the house Negro to tell the field Negroes how they should be acting correctly. It never addressed the offense he created. He created the offense. He never addressed the fact that he created the offense that caused people to be upset. He spent most of his broadcast blaming people for being upset, calling the black community emotional about the realities of police brutality. Well, the question would be, if your daughters or your son had been shot by the police, and the police said they feared for their life because of your son or your daughter, and they were left without medical attention, and they were bleeding out in the street, and the police stood by, many of them on these video recordings, you can actually see the police standing there or talking as your son or your daughter or your mother or your cousin or your nephew's life bleeds out onto the ground, then what would make you think that being upset is not a human reaction to what has happened? All right. And so it showed a real lack of what we might call in the education world, it showed a real lack of social intelligence and emotional intelligence, and understanding that all souls matter. I put on my page yesterday, because I have been in the fight for pro-life for over 20 years now. And I put on my page yesterday, it is just as grievous to me to hear about an unborn soul bleeding out on an abortion table as it is for me to hear about a soul that's already born, living life, enjoying life, being snuffed out unnecessarily, and bleeding out on a street corner. Both of those things are grievous to me. It's not a either or, it's a and both. And so I think we need to, especially my white Christians and brothers, I think we need to not assume that black people are less of a believer if they talk about police brutality, something that is happening at an increasingly alarming, disproportionate rate in our community, than abortion. Because the reality is, I'm speaking from my experience, the African American ministers that I know talk about both. We talk about both. We're concerned about both. And so it becomes concerning to me when I only see my white brothers and sisters rally around the issues of abortion, and they only rally around the issues of sexuality and sexual rights and sexual reproduction, but they don't rally around the souls that will eventually come from that sexual reality. All right. So I need you to care about not just the black unborn child. I would appreciate some empathy coming from you once the child is born. All right. And again, as I said on my page, to me it seems easier in some respects to show empathy and compassion for the unborn because they have yet to offend you. You can still see them as innocent. They have yet to choose a political party that you disagree with. They have yet to move into a faith that you disagree with, or choose no faith at all. So it's easier for me to show compassion to a clean slate, so to speak, with a child, unborn child, than it is for me to really show forth that compassion to somebody who may not think like me, who may not believe like me, but their life and their soul still matters. And when we talk about media narratives, I asked the Lord yesterday in prayer, I said, why is there such this, to me, why is there this differentiation between how we see those who are outside of the womb being killed versus those in the womb being killed, or life being snuffed out? And as I began to pray about it, he began to deal with me about the level of compassion and empathy, and our need to what is the word I want to use? Criminalize. We began to criminalize those who have already lived, and before their blood is dry on the street, there's already a narrative that was created to criminalize the victim. And it happens all the time. It happened with Philando Castile. Until many weeks later, people got a really full picture of him. But by then, they had already criminalized that man. They had already criminalized him. And then later it came out, oh, he was a nice guy. He was employed, and he was, a superintendent at a school lunchroom, and he was paying for children's lunch out of his pocket, and all of these different things. But that didn't come out until weeks later. The initial picture that people got of Philando Castile was he was some seedy criminal that needed to be, he deserved what he got. And so it's easier to say the child is innocent and doesn't deserve death than it is to stop and say, why do I keep falling for the criminalization of unarmed black people? You need to take a look at that. Not everyone who is being shot unarmed was a criminal, or deserved to be killed. Nobody who is going for their wallet to get their ID deserves to be shot dead. No one deserves to be shot dead because a tail light is out. And so you have to understand that, yes, the black community is angry because black people are being killed for things other people get a citation for and are allowed to show up in court about. Okay? All right. So let me go to 5 signs of soft white supremacists. This article was put out June 13th, 2018 by Jeff Rauner, Rouner. And the site you can find it on is houstonpress.com. I basically took some of his general points. I didn't write out the whole article. But these are things he says are 5 signs of a soft white supremacist. Number 1, your view of white supremacy is outdated. What is a white supremacist? He said, a soft white supremacist are people who deny or apologize or deflect and challenge the condemnation of racist acts. That's a soft white supremacist. So you might not be a full outright white supremacist, but if you're denying racist acts, if you're apologizing for them, if you're deflecting from what actually happened, and you challenge anyone who tries to condemn acts of racism, you might be a soft white supremacist. So number 1, your view of white supremacy is outdated. The fact of the matter is, as we have been studying, America is a white supremacy nation. It is. It was built on the supremacy of white people, specifically white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male landowners. Let me say that one more time. I know there was a lot. This nation was founded to enrich white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male landowners. The land ownership being what they would acquire once they got here. Because many of them were second sons coming from the English nobility system and the aristocracy. So the first sons already had all of the inheritance. They pretty much got everything. They got the land, they got the castles, all of that, the wealth that was attached to titles in England. The first son usually got it all. So the second son had 3 choices. He could either become a navyman, he could either go to war, so he could either become someone who worked on ships, he could either go to war, or he could become a part of the clergy, and the first son would give him what was called a parish or a church, and he would get a home with his spouse, and he would be in charge of that parish of people. So those were initially the 3 choices of a second son coming out of England. Then came this 4th choice. You could make your way as a colonizer or an adventurer or someone who went out to other lands to conquer them and take land and goods for yourself. So that's part of the reason why we got this whole moving over from London into the Americas, because these second sons were looking to have their own lifestyle. All right. So America is, by historical fact, a white supremacy nation. No major private or public power structure where people of color make up a majority of leadership roles. There is not one major private or public power structure where people of color make up a majority of the leadership roles. White people do run America, and this is by design, not by accident. Maintaining racial status quos is the norm. There is an unfounded feeling of threat as equality feels like oppression. Yes, Lady Apostle. So again, when people say that black people can be racist, by definition, we cannot, because in order to be racist, you have to have prejudice plus institutional power. Can black people be prejudiced? They most certainly can. Can they be bigoted? They most certainly can. But many times, angry black people are reacting to a racist system. Okay? We'll get into that, but 98% of all of the wealth in America is owned and controlled by white America. How am I overpowering you if you control 98% of the resources in the country? This is where delusion is taking place in the minds of people who keep saying that they're being oppressed and they are the ones under attack. Sir, ma'am, you own 98% of the wealth and resources in this country. And you're upset about Mr. Kaepernick earning a living. Just let that sink in. All right? We own almost everything, but we're upset because you got a little piece of something. All right. Number 2, you search for quote unquote middle ground with white supremacists. You search for middle ground. There is no middle ground between equal and unequal, between alt-right protesters who have murdered people and comparing them with Antifa who fight and challenge the alt-right. The alt-right have murdered people, and not just Heather Heyer. She's the most prominent case that has been put out there. Okay? The only way to accomplish these people, the alt-right, and we're going to get into their doctrine in detail today. These people, the alt-right, believe that they need to create what is called a white ethno-state. And the only way to accomplish a pure white nation in America is either by 1, genocide, killing off all black and brown people, or 2, exiling or expelling all black and brown people. Now you tell me which one you think is occurring right now. All right? They know this. They are looking for what they call a pure white ethno-state, and it's got to be done by either one or 2 ways. Genocide or policies that exile and expel black and brown people from this country. Let me go on. Number 3, you might be a soft white supremacist if you grab hold of isolated incidences to denounce any opposition to white supremacist agenda. Though some people do fake hate crimes, they are nowhere near the data on actual hate crimes. So what he's talking about is the people who say, well, these things are not really happening. These things are not really real. Here's this one incident where this person pretended that they were being attacked, or this person burned their own church down, like one gentleman did, I think, last year. or this person spray painted swastikas on their own house or their own locker in the school, and we found out that that person did it. Yes, there are people who fake hate crimes, but the number of actual hate crimes far outweigh the faked ones. So that's not an excuse to not pay attention to all of the actual hate crimes that are being committed. All right. Number 4, you believe that diversity and multiculturalism in America has, quote, gone too far. Again, you believe that diversity and multiculturalism in this country has gone too far. Let me reiterate. Black people make up no majority of any power system or structure in this country. Most would venture to say America has yet to go far enough when it comes to diversity and inclusion of other people in its power systems and structures. Black people don't control most of the money in this country. They control the spending power, which is why Nike and now Ford are now getting behind the activists. Why? Because they are looking at the spending power of black people, not your ownership power. I'll say this again. Those of you who are out here saying, woohoo, I'm going to go spend all my money on Nikes, can I please get you to go own some Nike stock? Go own some Ford stock, because Ford stock is probably about to go crash too once the people find out that Ford is now supporting activism. All right, go buy stock. Go own a piece of Nike. Yes, you can be cute and wear your Nikes. All right, but please, while you're in the middle of buying Nike, please go own some stock. The last time I checked, it was $79 a share. Most of you spend that on a new hairdo per week. Please go buy a stock of Nike. All right? Black people don't control any gas or natural resources in this country. Black people don't control a significant amount of political power in this country. So, when you say you are under attack, please understand there's a difference between feeling under attack and actually being under attack. You may feel you're under attack because you see that black and brown people are increasing in the country, but you have to deal with your unfounded fears and stop projecting your fears onto black people. Because we know what happens when white people project their fears onto black people. See Emmett Till. It's dangerous. All right? So there's a difference between feeling under attack and actually being under attack. Number 5, you might be a soft white supremacist. We're on white supremacy right now. We got a whole other one for you might be a racist. You might be a soft white supremacist if you spend time apologizing for, but not correcting, white supremacists. Here are some examples. When your relatives come around you and they feel very, very comfortable in your presence calling black people the N-word, they're just going N. And this N did this and this N did that. And I can't believe that. And look at that N run. Your relatives are comfortable saying the N-word around you, and you haven't corrected them. You might be a soft white supremacist. Your relatives who talk about the inferiority of people of color, and you haven't corrected them and said that's not true, you might be a soft white supremacist. Relatives who think that all black people are criminal or poor or low IQ, you might be a soft white supremacist. Relatives who are chanting, build the wall, lock them up, cage them like animals, and you haven't said a word and you're listening to your relatives talk like this, you might be a soft white supremacist. All right? So, let's talk a little bit about spotting signs of white supremacy. This comes from the wireless.co.nz, and they're talking about New Zealand in particular and the problem that New Zealand is having with white supremacist groups. There are two groups that they talked about in this article of spotting signs of white supremacy. They talked about a group called the Dominion Movement and National Front. The statistics were the fact that murders by white supremacists worldwide have doubled since 2016, making up the majority of extremist killings happening now. So when people say, if you notice, there hasn't been a lot of conversation lately about Islamic extremism. Anybody notice that? Not that it isn't happening, but the majority of killings happening lately have been through white extremist groups. The recruitment of white supremacists at universities has gone up 200% since 2017. So that means that they're looking for the next crop of white supremacist extremists in our colleges and universities. So you're talking about the millennials and Generation Z. That's who they're targeting, okay, as their next recruits for leadership. This article was very good because it talked about veiled wording, that when you hear these kinds of sentences or kinds of words being used, to pay attention, because this is a dog whistle for white supremacy. All right? Here are some words that they use in their advertising, on their websites, on their flyers to young people. They say things like, we want to revitalize the European culture and identity. Some of the images associated are an eagle looking over its shoulder. Another white supremacist movement they mentioned was Vanguard American. And then another symbol called the Sonningrad. And you can actually look up the Sonningrad so you can see what it looks like, but I'll give you the spelling here. The Sonningrad, excuse me. All right, Sonninrad. It's a particular symbol that is used in white supremacy. It's two circles, one inward, one circle inside another, and it's got these interesting rays that come all around it. But it's called the Sonningrad. Dominionism is a term that charismatic people should be really familiar with. I keep trying to tell some of our charismatic brothers and sisters that dominionism is a white supremacist theological thought. And some of you all still haven't figured it out. I'm going to tell you again. Anybody talking about their practice dominionism or they believe in dominionism, it is a white supremacist conservative Christian doctrine that seeks social and political power. Now, I know a couple of people in the charismatic circles that call themselves dominionists, and their speech and their support of the current administration shows me exactly why they are dominionist. All right, one more time. Dominionism is a white supremacist conservative Christian doctrine that seeks political and social power. All right? All while bearing the name of Christ. Many of us know the slogan "We will not be replaced" because of the Charlottesville marchers, which is an image of this here on this book. Yes. Thank you, Keisha Edmonds. Yes. Seven Mountains teaching comes out of dominionism. I know that's going to hurt a lot of people's feelings, but it is what it is. I don't teach Seven Mountains because I know where it comes out of. So the phrase we will not be replaced, or you will not replace us, which is what the white supremacists were chanting at Charlottesville, that is one of their slogans, because they believe that they are under attack and that they are being replaced by black and brown people. The reality is black and brown people have nothing to do with their replacement. All right? When you are killing yourself off, when your people group is killing themselves off through suicide, through alcoholism, through opioid crisis, you are extincting yourselves. So that needs to be dealt with within the white community. But if you're always deflecting and talking about what's wrong with the black community, you don't have time to look within your own community to see what can be done about the ways that you all are causing your own self-extinction. All right? One of the things I appreciate about this particular article is the fact that New Zealand is going after these things on an intentional basis. And one of their goals, they said, is this. Their goal is to lift up the rock and expose what has been happening in their country. Their goal is to lift up the rock, find out what's under it, expose it, identify it, understand it, and then bring an answer to it. I want to say hats off to New Zealand, who is actively within their country working on the problem of the rise of white supremacist groups. Hats off to you. You're not ignoring it. You're not taking people off the extremist list. You're actually recognizing the groups in your country that are bringing detriment, and you're working to solve your problem. Bravo, New Zealand. All right? White nationalists. We're moving on. That was white supremacy. White nationalists. All right? White nationalists believe that white identity should be the organizing principle that makes up Western civilization. What does that mean? White nationalists believe that whiteness, Europeanness, should be the principle by which the Western civilization is ordered, is put in order. So that means that structures in Western civilization need to remain Eurocentric. The opinion needs to remain Eurocentric. The look needs to remain Eurocentric. The leadership needs to remain Eurocentric. That's what white nationalists believe. They should be in charge of deciding and creating the guiding principles for Western civilization. All right? Sounds like a political point, talking point. All right? White nationalists advocate for policies to reverse what they call the browning of America and the loss of white majority. So all you have to do is just go through the politicians you've heard recently and listen to what they're saying. They're a white nationalist. They advocate for policies to reverse the browning of America and the loss of a white majority in this country. They find it to be threatening. They don't see it as progress because it goes against white nationalist thought and doctrine for who should be running Western civilization. They seek to end non-white immigration, both legal and illegal. So if you notice, the policies now that are coming out of Washington, D.C. is also targeting legal immigrants, people who are here legally. Remember, when he got into office, he said he was only going to target illegal immigration and he was going to leave the legal people alone. Well, now they're targeting legal and illegal immigrants. This is seen as a priority in the white nationalist agenda. This takes priority over their other two agendas, which is to end miscegenation, or to end the mixing of the races, and to end any program tied to multiculturalism, which would require races to mix together, to be around each other, to communicate with each other. All right? So they're not going to call it segregation. Just want to help some of us. They're going to call it ending multicultural programs and policies. They're going to defund any program centered around multiculturalism. Got it? Good. The new Jim Crow. Yes. All right. The goal is, for white nationalists, the goal is to return America to pre 1964. Why pre 1964? Because in 1964, a specific immigration law was passed and the Civil Rights Acts began in 1964. So they want to move us back to what America was like before those acts, before that legislation was passed. Again, they too want to create a white ethno-state, which would be carried out by either genocide of a people or by expulsion of people. And I'm going to give this warning again. Before Hitler really got down to business with genociding Ashkenazi Jews and 6 million others, before he really got down to that business, he was first expelling people from Germany. Well, you say, why would he have done that first? Well, if you have people in your country that really kind of shouldn't be there, or you think they shouldn't be there, or they have a country to return to, you don't want prying eyes on what is about to go down with your own citizens. So Hitler, before he went into his final solution, he was kicking people out. And then, as he was kicking people out, the wealthier Jews saw what was about to go down, and they left before the Holocaust. That's how some of them actually survived. Yes, some of them were snuck out of the country during the Holocaust, but many of the wealthier Jews left way before that because they saw what was coming. All right? So they saw the sword coming and they got out early. Hint, hint. I'm going to leave it right there. He also had meetings with church leaders who said, we will be silent, just leave us alone. We won't say it. We won't protest what you're doing. We won't make a fuss about it. Just don't bother us while you taking them out. And we've talked about that before, how the German church, and I believe that the American church is making the same mistake right now, repeating history. The German church, there would be carts of Jews going by to their death, to the death camps. And they could hear the Jews screaming and hollering and crying. And you know what the German church did? They turned up their worship music and sang louder. Well, that's what's happening with some of the white American church now. Black people are crying out. And what is the white church, some of them doing? They're turning up their worship louder. They're having worship nights like there's nothing going on in America that they need to be concerned about. I'm talking to you. Yep, I'm talking to you. Mm-hmm. So, um, when Black Americans see this, and especially Black Christians see that you don't care, that your life is going on as usual, you have no concern, no empathy, you think that this is just our problem. I don't know what's wrong with those people over there, and they need to work on this. Then yes, you're going to see people leave the organized faith. Because if you don't understand that murdering innocent, unarmed people is a serious indictment on your nation, then I don't know what to tell you. Like, this is a human issue. This is a human rights violation. The United Nations has told America several times that they are in violation of the rights of African Americans according to our own Constitution. Do you know what the United States did? The United States pulled out of all of the councils for the UN concerning the fair treatment of humans. They did that, I think, last year. I have to find the article. But we pulled out of the councils that would hold us accountable for the mistreatment of people. So if we pulled out of the councils of accountability, what do you think is going to happen? If we pulled out of the international tribunal councils for accountability as to how we treat human beings, what do you think is going to happen in our nation? They just by action let the international community know we don't care what you think about how we're treating the people who live in our country. So yes, other countries do issue travel bans and travel warnings about coming to the United States. All right? White nationalists are obsessed with declining white birth rates and they base this on the 2001 book called The Death of the West, written by Pat Buchanan. He says in this book, quote, immigrant invasion will turn the United States into a third world country by 2050. Yes, Lady Ravonda. So because of this notion that is in this man's book, people started flipping out. Because he gave this prediction that by 2050, America was going to be a third world country. So they didn't take data. They took the words of someone who wrote a book and started flipping out. This was not a book based on data. This was a book based on someone's personal fears about America's increasing Black and brown population. Many of the white nationalists are what they call paleo-conservatives. This is a term you can go look up. They are paleo-conservatives. What does that mean? Paleo-conservatives believe in limited government, restricting immigration, reversing multicultural programs, and deconstructing social safety nets. That would include Medicare, that would include veterans care, that would include things like SNAP, right? The Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. They believe in deconstructing social safety nets. People who have become really like figureheads with white nationalists are Richard Spencer, a gentleman by the name of Peter Brimlow, and Jared Taylor. All right. Pursuing a white ethno-state falls into two categories. There are two categories of thought among white nationalists about how they're going to pursue this ethno state. And I need you to pay attention to these two categories because you're going to see them begin to arise as we come into November for the elections. You have the mainstreamers who believe that they can infiltrate and subvert existing systems like the Republican Party, and they can disguise their extremist politics by integrating with what they already see happening with the Republican Party. The best example of this would be what's happening in the state of Florida right now with Ron DeSantis. All right. He put out a very white nationalist, dog whistling political ad where his wife is talking about how he loves President Trump and he teaches his children and he loves his children. Well, in this campaign ad, he is reading to his child a sign that says, "Make America Great Again." And then in another scene, he's playing with these blocks and he's saying, "Yeah, build that wall." So Ron DeSantis could be possibly a white nationalist, but he is playing to the campaign notions that are already there within the Republican Party, because he's already said some things about his opponent that have many people calling him an outright racist. But it could also be the fact that he believes in white nationalism. The second group are called vanguardists. Vanguardists. They want revolution. They want public demonstrations. And they want to accelerate what they believe is the collapse of the United States. These are called vanguards. These are the people that go to a bus station and stab 2 black women in the neck and then run off. Those are the vanguardists. These are people who want revolution, they want public demonstration, and so they will commit random acts of violence in order to achieve their goals. Now, I'm about to give you a long list of white nationalist groups because I need to give them to you. So you can go back. We're at right about the hour mark here, coming up on the hour mark. You can go back and you can play this section for people that you might know, because these are known white nationalist groups based on the databases from the Southern Poverty Law Center and also from the Anti-Defamation League. All right. And I want you to pay attention because many of you are probably going to hear your states named more than once. More than once. So here we go. Let me see if I can fly through them real quick. Known white nationalist groups. You have Alternative Right in ATL, Alt-Right Corporation, Alexandria, Virginia, the American Freedom Party in New York, Indiana, Montana, North Dakota, and LA, American Freedom Union in Hampton, Pennsylvania, American Renaissance in Oakton, Virginia, Auburn White Student Union on the campus of Auburn in Auburn, Alabama, Bugs, BUGS in Columbia, South Carolina, Conservative Citizens Foundation in St. Charles, Missouri, Council of Conservative Citizens in Jefferson, Maryland, and Potosi, Missouri, Countercurrents Publishing, New York, Seattle, San Francisco, Counterfund in Pennsylvania, Faith and Heritage in Killeen, Texas, Forza Nuova in New Jersey and Arizona, Foundation for the Marketplace of Ideas in Clinton, Michigan, GOY, G-O-Y, GOY Fund Me in Paoli, Indiana, H.L. Mencken Club in Pennsylvania, Identity Europa. Now this one is spelled this way. Their Europa is spelled with a V instead of a U. Identity Europa is found in Colorado, California, Arizona, Florida, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, and Virginia. National Policy Institute, Alexandria, Virginia. New Albion in Maine. Northwest Front in Washington. Occidental Descent in Eufaula, Alabama. Occidental Observer in Louisiana. Charles Martel Society in ATL, Atlanta. Operation Homeland in Alexandria, Virginia. Patriot Front in Chicago, California, Washington, and Texas. Patriot Flags in Charleston, South Carolina. Pioneering Little Europe in Montana. Radix Journal, that's RADIX Journal in Montana. Real Republic of Florida, found in Tallahassee, Florida. Red Ice, Charleston, South Carolina. Rise Above Movement, California. Root, let me see, Root Box in Paoli, Indiana. Scott Townsend Publishers in DC. Stormfront, based in West Palm Beach, Florida. New Byzantium Project, based in Charlottesville, Virginia. Fitzgerald Griffin, based in Vienna, Virginia. The Right Stuff, based in Atlanta, Texas, Baltimore, Nevada, New York, Nebraska, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Arizona, California, Florida. Indiana, Michigan, Oregon, uh, Texas, Vermont, Virginia, Washington, Washington, D.C., and New York. True Cascadia, based in Alaska, Idaho, and Washington State. TYR1 Security, based in Alexandria, Virginia. V-Dare Foundation, based in Warrenton, Virginia, where we just had our Labor of Love event. Washington Summit Publishers, based in Augusta, Georgia. Western Outland Supply Company, based in Arizona. And two more. White Boy Society, based in Illinois. And White Rabbit Radio, based in Dearborn, Michigan. So, while you might be jumping and shouting and holding revival, these people are organized all around the country and nation, planning a white ethno state. Do I need to say that again, or do I need to make that more clearer? I'm waiting. Somebody give me some hearts or something. Do I need to say it again, or do I need to clarify any of that? No? I'm good? Anybody? Pastor Ben? Lady Barbara? Am I good? Do I need to repeat, or do I need to go on? Good. All right. So, moving into my last subjects here. 10 signs you might be racist. Apostle said repeat. Okay, I'm going to repeat for the people who didn't understand what I just said. While you're jumping and shouting and planning your next breakthrough, these people who believe in a white ethno state by genocide, that means war against all peoples of color, they want a white ethno state by genocide or expulsion. They are organizing and planning all around the country. I don't think there was a state that was left out. Maybe Hawaii. Hawaii was probably the only one that wasn't mentioned. All right. But they're planning a white ethno state. So, live ready. 10 signs you might be racist. Number 1, if you say I'm not a racist at least twice a week. Now, I didn't count. I started to, but I didn't count how many times the pastor who was having his conversation said, "I'm not a racist." You might be a racist if you say I'm not a racist at least twice a week. The fact that you need to tell people that you're not means that you at least have some tendencies, or you are known for saying racially charged things all the time. Number 2, you say, "I'm not a racist, but," if you're about to qualify what you are about to say, you might not want to say it. If you're not racist, why would you need to say something that sounds racist? Number 3, you say, "I don't hate black people or Mexican people or, I don't know, Jewish people, but why do they have to do XYZ?" That is a remix of number 2. "I'm not a racist, but," just don't do it. Number 4, you might be racist if you feel compelled to point out the worst characteristics of another people group and you cannot list anything positive about them. If you are consistently pointing out what's negative about someone else's people group and you never address your own negativity in your own people group, you might be racist. Number 5, you explain to people why you're not a racist. "I'm not a racist because," for example, "I'm not a racist because my cat is black. I'm not a racist because I wear Nikes. I'm not a racist because I like rap music." You might be racist if you have to explain to people why you're not a racist, especially by pointing out people that you associate with or have family members or sleep with. Don't do it. Number 6, you defend racists for their good qualities. Having good qualities doesn't mean that you're not racist. I'm sure somewhere in Jeffrey Dahmer's heart was some good qualities. Jeffrey Dahmer had friends. Didn't make him less of a serial killer. Number 7, you say, "I don't know what to call you," or you actually have a problem with being restricted in not calling people the N-word. You say, "But why can't I call them that? They use it in rap music." Well, let me let you in on something. All black people don't like rap music. All black people don't listen to rap music. All black people aren't excited about video vixens. All black people don't like Beyonce or Nicki Minaj or Cardi B. All black people don't use the N-word. Some of us don't use it at all with anybody in any context for any reason. Hand raised. Because I don't want you to ever get comfortable in my presence using it. I don't use the ER or the GA. I don't use either of it. So don't come to me talking about "what's up, my," because you might get a different side. Praise the Lord. Hallelujah. So you might be racist if you are so dying to use the N-word. What's wrong with you? Work on that. Number 8, you might be racist if you parade your black friends out and bring them out like trophies. We're not your trophies. "Hey, everybody, look at me. I'm with my black friend today." No, stop it. Stop. Please. Please stop. Please stop. You don't have to prove you're not racist if you're not racist. And if we've never seen or heard you talk about any issues that matter to Black lives, and then all of a sudden you want to show me how many Black friends you have, that is suspect. All right? So just think on what I just shared. All right? Take it in. Woo-saw. Breathe deeply. All right? You're going to be okay. But you might be racist. But God can deliver. He can. All right. Here are some data on white Americans. All right. Some data on white Americans from bigthink.com. The data is from 2017. All right. And when we talk about how this country still has a way to go in terms of mindset and thought processes about Black people and people of color in general, I want you to think about these stats that I'm going to read to you based on data. All right? 28% of white Americans believe it is okay to discriminate when selling a home. 21% would not want to live where half of their neighbors were Black in the neighborhood. Now, we know this to be true. We could just look at our block right now and how everybody's selling their homes because more people of color are moving into our neighborhood. 21% oppose a close relative marrying a Black person. This is 2017 data, not 1964. 40% of white Americans believe that white people work harder than Black people. 40%. 45% believe that Black people lack the self-will to pull themselves up out of poverty. Now I'm going to repeat again. Keep in mind that 98% of all wealth in the United States is owned and controlled by white people. So where are we pulling ourselves to? I'm just saying. If you're talking about in this country, someone pulling themselves out of poverty, that would require a equal or fair redistribution of resources, which you don't want. All right? So just think about, you're saying, I don't understand why they can't pull themselves out, but you're not taking into account that you own 98% of all the wealth and resources in the country. Does not compute. All right? 34% of white Americans believe that Black people shouldn't insert themselves where they are not wanted. So again, where am I pulling myself to if you're telling me I'm not wanted there? I'm trying to make sense of this reasoning. Yeah, our ancestors' money. Exactly. And the last statistic was 46% of all Americans think racism will always exist. So for those of you who are working in this field of racial justice, racial reconciliation, understanding what you're up against, 46% of all Americans think that racism will always exist. All right? So, how to tell if you're a racist? Here are some self-evaluation points. All right? How to tell if you're a racist. Number 1, evaluate yourself and see if you think that some races or some ethnos are better than others. Do you think that some ethnos are better than others? Or do you think everyone's equal? Do you think that God created everyone, every ethnos equal? Or do you think that some really are better than others? Evaluate yourself and see if you think that all members of one particular ethnos have a certain quality. Do you think all Mexicans are rapists? Do you think that all Asians are smart? Do you think that all black people are lazy? All right. Here's another one. Number 3. Think about what are your snap judgments about people that you meet of other ethnos. When you see a big black male coming towards you, what is your snap judgment? What are you thinking about? Are you thinking that this is somebody I want to say hello to and engage? Or is your snap judgment fear? Go to the other side of the road. Grip my pocketbook closer to me. What are your snap reactions? Here's some other ones to think about. Do you dismiss concerns about racism? Do you dismiss concerns about racism? Number 5. Do you notice or pay attention to racial injustice? Or do you think it does not exist or that it is exaggerated? Number 6. Does a person's race or their ethnos change the way you talk to them? This is one I see often online. I can tell when a white male has gone to my page and figured out that I'm a black woman because their tone towards me changes entirely and it becomes disrespectful and condescending. And I especially find this among white Christian males. Yes, I'm talking to you today. That somehow, because I'm either a woman or because especially I'm a black woman, that what I have just told you based on fact and data needs to be not believed or challenged. And I will give you links and everything. But the tone becomes disrespectful and condescending. And most of my friends already know. You probably have one time to try that, and if you continue, I'm just going to block you. I really am. Because life is too short to be disrespected by people who don't know you. I'll meet you on the other side. I'll let you hear from someone who you can receive. Because if you can't receive me, there's no point in us continuing the conversation. So, does a person's race change the way you address them or talk to them? Are you condescending and rude to people who are not white? Number 7, do you talk differently about people of different ethnos when they are no longer in the room? Are you all kind and polite in front of black people, but you have a total different disposition when black people are not in your presence? Number 8, do you treat people of all different ethnos the same? So, black friend comes over your house, do you give them paper plates? White friend comes over your house, do you serve them on the fine china? Do you treat people of different ethnos the same? Number 9, do you identify your own biases and admit when you are being biased and apologize? Do you admit that, hey, I'm still working through my racism? I was born in a country that was created off of racism. That there are implicit biases that we have all been taught. There are prejudices and bigotry things that black people have been taught about white people. Some of them, I'm coming to find out, unfortunately, my eldest was right. People are always getting on the conservative racists, but I'm going to tell you the honest truth. I have met more liberal racists than more conservative racists. I have met more people who claim to be white liberal who have turned out to be straight racist and toxic and dangerous to my life than I have the conservatives. Because the conservatives are going to tell me to my face, I don't like you. I don't like black people. I need y'all to be gone. I want to expel you. I don't like Haitians, etc., etc. They're going to put it out there, many of them. Liberal racists, they will smile in your face, feed you on fine china, and then throw the china out in the trash can. And still hold up a fist talking about Black Lives Matter. Those kind of people are dangerous. All right? They're dangerous. Because you don't know when they're going to turn. So, changing your views. How, if you've been listening to this broadcast and you realize, man, I think I am racist. I think I do have some racial tendencies that need to be addressed in my own life. I think I need to do the work on myself. You don't stop being a human being. You don't stop being a person that people care about because you are racist or you have racist tendencies. The point now is to work through them. You don't have to stay a racist. You don't have to continue believing stereotypes and false narratives about other ethnos. So how can you change your views? Number one, begin to notice stereotypes and begin to notice when you are stereotyping people. Here's a stereotype. All big, tall black men do not play sports. My husband can attest to that. Every time we go somewhere, someone is saying to him, and it's usually a white person, he never gets these comments from black people. He doesn't. It's usually a white person saying, did you play professional football or something? And where'd you play for? And then when my husband proceeds to tell them about his profession, they always come back and say, man, if I had your body, I'd be playing professional sports. Or, man, you should have played professional sports. Or you should go and try and play professional sports. My husband is like, listen, I'm 50. What? You can't be 50. I know. But no, we're not doing that. Okay? But there's an assumption that if you have an athletic body as a black male, then you must be engaging in sports. That's a stereotype. Yep. So, number two, question your snap judgments that you are making. Question your snap judgments that you're making. Is it coming from a place of knowledge, or is it coming from a place of fear or something you've been told about another ethnic group? Number three, if you haven't been, start noticing injustice. A great site that you can join that is specifically for white people, put together by white people to help white people self-educate and understand what is going on in the world, is called whitenonsenseroundup.com. That's what they specialize in. They help white people like themselves to become more knowledgeable about what is happening. You can join them on Facebook. You can go to their website, and they have an entire section for resources for white people so you can begin to educate yourself and not wait for your one or two black friends to educate you. Number four, take people seriously when they're calling something racist or when they're telling you that what you have done is racist. And number five, keep on educating yourself. We are all, let me say that, we are all doing the work of loosening ourselves from implicit bias, bigotry, and prejudice. No one is immune to thinking something about another ethnos that they shouldn't be thinking. Nobody is immune to thinking stereotypically about another ethnic group. So that's something that hopefully we are all working to get delivered from. All right? And if you'll be honest with yourself, You can go down the line and probably growing up, just things that you've heard about people that if you are friends with that ethnos, you now know that those things are not true. All right. So as I close here, tomorrow it looks like I'm going to be able to get into the book. This one, Everything You Love Will Burn. We're going to be reading about these different white supremacist movements. I'm going to, for the last 5 minutes here, I'm going to open us up in this book so you know where we're going. This is the author's note. So this will give you an idea where we're going tomorrow. I hope that I have been saying something today that was helpful to you, that was enlightening to you, and hopefully you will pay attention to your environment, because believe it or not, we are living in perilous times. For some it is the best of times, for some it is the best and the worst of times, but with Christ's help, we're going to be okay. Because one thing I do know about the Lord is whatever the enemy has planned through someone who has allowed themselves to be controlled by him, God can deliver us. Author's note here. He says, the author's name is Vegas Tenold. He says, as I write this, 19 people are being treated at University of Virginia Medical Center for injuries sustained when a white supremacist drove his car into a crowd on the streets of Charlottesville, Virginia. One woman is dead. The victims were struck as they protested one of the largest gatherings of right-wing radicals in America's recent history. Last night, I watched hundreds of predominantly young white men march in a torchlight parade paying tribute to a history that produced slavery, Jim Crow, and a society that still discriminates against minorities in a million ways, large and small. They were not only paying tribute to white hegemony, but also protesting the cracks in it, airing grievances that seem both petty and fabricated. As they marched in mass to chants of Jews will not replace us, I had to wonder exactly how Jews were replacing them, and how these young white men, by any statistical measure perched at the top of the social food chain, had come to feel so deeply grieved as to see the world's progress as an attack on them. I've tried to write a book that explains the resurgence of right-wing radical groups that as of this moment seem only to be growing more confident and exuberant by the day. This is a book about the people who, for various reasons, have come to hold opinions and beliefs that many of us find abhorrent. It is not primarily about what is known as the alt-right, the anonymous, the internet-dwelling trolls who rose to fame during the 2016 presidential campaign. Instead, this book is about the everyday man, those who march in the streets, whose beliefs are rooted in the flotsam of decades of American racism, anti-Semitism, and white supremacy. In writing this book, I have attempted to step aside and present as unvarnished a look into the lives of these on the radical right as I can. It should be stated that I am not a neutral observer. In many ways, I represent what my subjects believe to be the enemy. As long as I've been able to vote, I voted socialist in my native Norway, and I've made no secret about that in my reporting. Still, I've tried to approach the subjects of this book without bias. I'm grateful for the way they have in large part returned the favor. The main characters in this book include Matthew Heimbach of the Traditionalist Workers' Party, Jeff Schopp of the National Socialist Movement, and Dan Elmquist of the KKK. They represent three contemporary yet disparate approaches to American white nationalism. Respectively, they represent a modern, more pragmatic strain, a European nationalist socialist strain, and a profoundly American strain. Taken together, they are the cross-section of white nationalism in America today. But there are others, some who are mentioned in this book and some who are not, who are also a part of the tapestry. This book was never meant to be exhaustive of everything that stirs them on. There are others, the writer Leonard Zeskind for one, who have already done that admirably. There were many parts of this book I found difficult to write, and there are parts that may be difficult to read. It's safe to say that this book contains slurs, racial and otherwise, and I debated at some length whether to include them. In the end, I decided to keep any offensive quotes untouched because the words people choose matter. It is not my place to take offense on behalf of others, nor would I want to make the opinions and statements presented by the subjects any more or any less offensive than they are. The book also contains scenes of violence. Some of these events were reported to the police, others were not. There were instances during the reporting for this book when I witnessed extreme violence, yet I did nothing to stop it. I believe that for my own safety and the safety of those with me at the time, I did not have a choice. For that reason, some names in this book have been altered. The social cost of being active in white nationalist or supremacist groups can be considerable, and for those who weren't prepared to participate with full names, I pushed back against most requests for anonymity and afforded it only to those whose personal safety would be affected. Most names remain intact. The reporting for this book always took place with the full knowledge and consent of my subjects. I never concealed who I was or presented myself as anything but a journalist. For the very few scenes in the book where I was not present, I relied on first-hand witness accounts, which corroborated as far as possible. Descriptions of inner monologues are based on extensive interviews. Descriptions of events that took place before my time are based on the reporting and research of others. For terminology, I have kept things orderly as I could. The white nationalist movement is awash with different terms for seemingly similar beliefs, and figuring out what to call the different factions and ideologies is daunting. There are those who believe that everyone on the radical right, from the so-called alt-right to the skinheads, should only be called Nazis, and is a point well taken. They all show an affinity for the words and teachings of Adolf Hitler, so calling them all neo-Nazis makes sense. However, the terms Nazi or neo-Nazi refer specifically to National Socialists, and because there is a distinct faction within the far right that identifies them as such, using those terms as a catch-all becomes problematic because it makes it impossible to describe the actual Nazis in the movement. White supremacist is similarly problematic because it assumes that everyone in the movement believes the white race is superior to others. Although there certainly is a large contingent of those who believe in the inferiority of any race that isn't white, there are also those who don't. So labeling everyone white supremacist becomes an oversimplification. I've chosen then to use these terms: white nationalist movement, the far right, or the radical right. These terms are not perfect. Some might argue that these terms are neither too facile or too generous, but I have tried to be specific as possible. If I set out to write this book with the goal of understanding the far right, or perhaps broadly racism and bigotry, then what I have learned is unsatisfactory. As much as I would like to have found one single underlying reason for racism and bigotry, I cannot say that I have. There are many contributing factors, and even identifying those is not enough to provide a satisfactory explanation. Social status, income, education, location. These are all elements that contributes to a person's worldview, but they cannot paint a complete picture. It is often said that the KKK is generational. You joined the Klan because your father was in the Klan, and his father before him. This is also patently untrue. I've met many men and women in the Klan who were actually first generation. But even if it were not, it wouldn't sufficiently explain why its members believe the white race is superior. In our current world information, simply being raised with certain beliefs is not an excuse for keeping them. Even Klansmen know that their worldview isn't considered appropriate. Poverty also isn't quite enough to explain the rise of racist nationalism. It is quite possible to be poor and tolerant. Perhaps the answer to why some people believe in the inferiority of other races lies in how we see ourselves. Richard Spencer, the person who first came up with the term alt-right, told me he was an identitarian. and that his identity was first and foremost a white man. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about Christian identity and giving you all some in-depth talk about that as well. By defining who we are also defining who we are not. And if we are not them, then our interests are not theirs. I said this yesterday, that when you see someone else's injustices as not connected to you as a human being, then that means you don't see their plight as a part of something that you need to worry about or you need to solve. This is the only way to rationalize the construct of white pride on which the members of the far right base their lives. But white pride is itself problematic because it presupposes that all whites share common cultural bonds in which to take pride. This too is a fallacy. There is no such thing as white culture. There is, or European culture for that matter. There is German culture, Irish culture, Norwegian culture, but in the absence of a homogeneous European culture, it becomes easier to define white culture not by what it is, but by what it is not. In the eyes of the people I've covered in this book, that tends to mean not African American, not Hispanic, not South Asian, not East Asian, not indigenous, not gay, lesbian, queer, and so on. The list contracts or expands depending on who you talk to. If 6 years spent with the radical right taught me anything about the underlying reason for white nationalism, it is this: we are not them, and they are not us. The whole notion of othering is what white nationalism is based on. And the more that you listen, especially in Christendom, to some of these white pastors who are talking, you will continue to hear them and us language. And that is a red flag, because we are the body. There's no them and us in Christ. It's we are the body. So I want to thank you for your time and attention today. I want to thank you for giving me this extra time. And I hope that you will come back tomorrow, because we're going to be talking about, again, I'm going to be reading this journalist who spent 6 years inside of the white nationalist movement. He's going to be sharing with you their thoughts and their insights. And so tomorrow it's going to get a little bit more in depth. We're going to talk about Christian identity. And so please come back, because you want to hear what the Christian identity is really all about and how it has crept into Christianity in general. And a lot of people, I believe, are under white supremacist pastors. And you may be a black person, but your pastor may be a Christian supremacist, white supremacist, and you might not even realize it. So I think it's important for you to come back, listen in, and then pay attention to the people who are around you, and pay attention to language, because language matters. Some of them are telling you who they are, and you're not listening, or you don't know the language, so you cannot decode what is being said to you. All right? Thank you again so much for your time and attention. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So please go out today and be light. Take care, and God bless.